All right. I hope you've been finding your niche activities and other activities during the day too a little more convincing for yourselves to come about and finding those for yourselves. Right? Now, let's jump into your design thinking principle. This is going to be an overview, right? There'll be a deeper one when we get into the RISE 2 level. What we're going to see is there is a methodical approach towards kind of finding the right kind of digital asset that's going to work based on the niche that you choose, right? To some extent, we have been using design thinking principle for even finalizing your niche and the micro niches, right? So, for example, while uh, while we were doing the whole of the steps, the 4 steps that I talked about right earlier, until the time that you finalized and validated your niche, you remember we had those 100 questions resulting into 100 answers, right? That's step 1 to step 2. Then you derive certain answers which you then picked up as a pattern, and you try to put it into the marketplace, right, to see and validate it, right? That became a third step. Fourth, from there you got some answers, which you realize in what is it really that you want to finalize with. That became a validation process for you, right? Which would then help you jump into creating your digital assets in that space, right? So micro niche. Now, similarly, design thinking principle consists of 5 elements, right? That we went through right now. First one is empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and then test. Now, these are industry names. Okay, so this is not our proprietary activity, etc. This is an industry design thinking principle. Right? Empathize typically deals with you, where you put yourselves in the shoes of the customer, right? So, if you realize in the small box out there, talked about persona, challenges, pain points, and decision. This is how you relate to your target audience. So you empathize with them to see what they require. Hence, you generated 100 questions and you are trying to find answers in the space that you work, right? So that you can specifically pick that audience that you can relate to because you went through yourself so that, and you can give them answers that they're looking for in a guided process, right? Let's go to define, right? Now, define, as you see, right? If you see in the small box again, seek to understand, be non-judgment, and do interviews. Now, the 100 questions that we talked about, right? And you are now empathizing your customer group. What you need to do next is define their problems. So this typically happens, right? Of course, one way is what we did the research for this 4 steps. That is a part and process of the whole activity. This goes a little step further. You start defining by, not being judgmental what happened to you and what happened according to your activities. You try to understand what the story was for the other person. Okay, and this typically comes by interviewing them. So your close knit group or you create an environment where people can speak to you for their problems, which we discussed as a one-on-one and so on and so forth, right? Which I also conduct myself. So that will give you an orientation of what sort of understanding, right? Your kind of audience is looking at to ensure that the path that you're working toward creating a digital asset is on the right one. Okay, so here the key point to take away is by interviewing people one on one, unless you get your direct answers, right, by virtue of writing emails or doing a survey online or whatever that is that you do, you define that problem. Okay, and once you define the problem, it gets easier to ideate around that space. So how do you do that? You start prioritizing whatever you've taken as input through your interviews, through your surveys, or whatever you did, right? You prioritize them based on what you know, what the people want, that when you relate to them through advertising, right? And share your feedback against those prioritizations that you created, right? That itself will give you a dialogue between two parties to get furthermore details by virtue of again interviewing them or passing on information in terms of blogs or passing or getting feedbacks through your email mechanism or by virtue of creating webinars where you're posting questions to get answers for, right? Saying that what you're going to do. Yeah. So once you define the problem, you ideate to create a digital asset around the space by doing your bit of validations repeatedly. One of the validations that I showed you was by going to the marketplace and revalidating your niche. Similarly, you can go to Quoras and the medias of the world to do the same thing, right? To ask the right kind of questions to ensure that the digital asset that you're creating is making sense. So once you get that feedback and you are sure, now a little more surer on the ideation that has come about, you start making a prototype, right? Now, what we discussed until then is, suppose you decide to create a courseware, and we discussed something on that, the sketch artist example, for example. After doing all these activities in terms of design thinking, also, the artist derives to the fact that he has to make charcoal painting or still life, right? For which he now wants to make a course online. What he's derived through interview with the people who came to him and whatever he discussed and whatever emails he sent out and he got responses for, he realized that maybe best way to serve that community, that kind of persona of people, is through creating a courseware. So he creates an e-courseware, right, by generating maybe the first or the second kind of sessions or creating an online webinar repeatedly to make people understand so that their following increases and those people become viral to make join more. He takes those inputs and starts putting his initial, so to speak, the lectures in place or his courseware in place, and that becomes a prototype in itself, right? Prototype that can be used will then typically have certain principles, and some of them are mentioned in that box there. It follows a KISS principle, as they call it, right? Keep it super simple, right? And repeat a few things that are more important for a person to derive, because in one shot, it's typically human behavior not to get it, right? Unless people are super smart. Then experiment with it. Let people throw challenges at people so that you know what they are facing practical problems with, right? And the initial now this will further give you feedback to improvise or improve your initial e-course material, right? The initial courses. Now that initial course material is called the minimum viable product, incidentally. Similarly, you can do the same thing for maybe you want to create an ebook, or you might want to create a YouTube channel for this, serving this purpose, or you might want to create a Patreon channel to do this thing where people pay you for these things, or you create a donation-oriented site where you create these things, go piecewise on it, and people give you donation by learning for free, of course, and whatever they feel is their value for that, giving that. Now, this is where the prototype comes into play from a MVP, that is a minimal viable product perspective, right? And then you put it to test. Once you have that MVP, that is, you got enough feedback, you have enough initial outcome out of it, from where you feel it's near perfect, you now start testing in the market. You broad base it, start marketing it through, right? And once you market it through, you get better feedback. You might want to tweak it a little bit more, right? And this process of testing is where again the whole sales and marketing activities come to play, where you require tech skills and automation to do these things. Right? So these are design thinking principles which will be used throughout the whole RISE activities, right? And go deeper into the second step, where say a RISE 2, where we go about deriving our digital assets. All right. I hope this gives you a good overview of how you research, how you find your micro niches, how you get into design thinking to create a basic viable product of yours, and then how you use it to market it. All right. On that note, let's go to the next one. Next one is going to be a challenge. So let me go to that in the next lecture, and I'll see you there.